I didn't expect the afternoon sun to feel this heavy, or her presence to feel even heavier. She stood there in the yard, a pair of light gardening gloves tugged halfway down her wrists, a straw hat tilted just enough to hide her eyes, until she lifted her chin and looked at me. "Help me in the garden," she said. Simple words, almost casual. But there was something in the way she said me that stayed in the air. I nodded, my voice sticking somewhere in my throat. Sure. She was in her mid-40s, though the word mid never seemed to fit her. Everything about her felt complete, assured, the curve of her shoulders, the quiet grace of her movements, the way her hair slipped free from the tie at the back of her neck. She carried herself like someone who knew how to be seen and how to hide at the same time. I stepped closer, the grass brushing against my ankles, the scent of damp earth and roses rising from the soil. She handed me a small spade, her fingers brushing against mine longer than they had to. Warm, deliberate, maybe accidental, though I doubted it. "Dig here," she said softly, pointing to a patch near her knees. She crouched down, the fabric of her dress tugging against her hips, and I lowered myself beside her. The garden was quiet except for the faint buzz of insects and the distant hum of traffic. Yet in that silence, every shift of her body, every breath she took, seemed louder than anything else. I tried to focus on the soil, on the roots twisting beneath the surface, but her hand moved near mine again. A brush of knuckles. A pause. She didn't look at me, at least not right away. But when she did, her eyes held me there, steady, unblinking. "You're stronger than you look," she murmured, almost teasing, though her voice carried something deeper. I swallowed, not sure if she meant the words or if she was daring me to answer. Maybe I just needed the right reason to show it. Her lips curved, not quite a smile, not quite a secret. She leaned closer to adjust the plant, her shoulder grazing my arm. The contact was small, fleeting, but it burned into me, spreading heat through places I didn't know could ache. I caught the scent of her perfume, faint, floral, mixed with the earthiness of the garden. She didn't move away immediately. Instead, she let the closeness linger, her breath brushing against my cheek as she whispered something about the roots needing space. But it wasn't the roots that needed space, it was me. Or maybe both of us. I shifted slightly, my hand steadying hers as the stem bent under her touch. Her fingers tightened around mine, not in correction, but in something else. Something unspoken. She looked at me again, and this time her gaze didn't break away. The air thickened, as if the sun itself leaned down to listen. My chest felt too tight, my pulse too loud, and still I didn't pull back. Neither did she. Her hand slid free of the glove and settled against my wrist, warm skin on warm skin. A quiet, deliberate hold. Not forceful. Not hesitant. Just, closer. The moment stretched, fragile and dangerous, as if the garden itself was holding its breath. Then, suddenly, the sound of the back door creaked open. She didn't let go. And I didn't either. The sound of the back door faded quickly, leaving only the garden silence between us. She finally pulled her hand away, slipping the glove back on like nothing had happened, but the ghost of her touch stayed burning on my skin. She cleared her throat. "You're not very used to this kind of work, are you?" Her tone was lighter now, safer, but her eyes gave her away. They searched mine as though waiting for me to slip, to admit what we both knew. I forced a half-smile. "Not really. But I like learning." It wasn't about gardening, and she knew it. For a while, we worked in fragments of conversation. She asked about classes, about my plans, and I asked about the flowers she planted years ago. She spoke with a softness that felt earned, like she had lived through enough storms to appreciate roots that held steady. And beneath her words, I caught glimpses of something else. Loneliness, maybe. Her marriage had ended quietly a few years back. Everyone knew, though nobody said much. She stayed, kept the house, kept the garden, but there was a weight in her voice when she mentioned how quiet it had become lately. "I used to plant twice as much," she said, brushing dirt from her wrist. "It's different when no one's really around to see it." Her words slipped out casually, but I felt the edge beneath them. She wasn't just talking about flowers. I wanted to say something bold, reckless, honest, but instead I just nodded, fingers tightening around the spade. The age gap pressed against the back of my mind, unspoken but undeniable. She was old enough to be seen as untouchable, respectable. I was old enough to know better, but young enough that others would call it foolishness if they ever saw the way I looked at her. And yet, when she leaned closer to brush a smudge of dirt from my cheek, none of that mattered. Her hand lingered, fingertips pressing just a little too long before she pulled away. "You missed a spot," she said quietly, almost whispering. I didn't breathe until her hand was gone. Every small movement became something charged, the way her hair slipped forward when she bent over the soil, the way her lips parted slightly as she studied the plants. I tried not to notice, but my eyes betrayed me. She noticed. She always noticed. And sometimes, she didn't stop me. At one point, she asked me to pass her the watering can. When I handed it to her, her fingers brushed against mine again, deliberate this time, holding for just a second longer than they should have. The weight of that second felt heavier than anything else in the world. Neither of us said a word. The sun dipped lower, painting the yard in golden light. Shadows stretched long across the grass, and the quiet between us grew thicker, heavier. Finally, she set the can down, wiped her hands against her dress, and looked at me. Really looked at me. Her lips parted as if to say something, then closed again. Instead, she just touched my arm, light, brief, but enough to leave me rooted to the spot. And for the first time, she didn't pull away quickly. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full, alive, trembling with everything neither of us dared to speak. The garden had grown quiet enough that I could hear the rhythm of her breathing. Slow, steady, close. Too close. She stood just in front of me, brushing soil from her palms, her dress catching the last traces of sunlight. I couldn't stop watching, the curve of her neck, the way her hair slipped across her cheek. My hand twitched at my side, aching to reach out. And for a moment, I almost did. Her eyes flicked up and caught mine, holding, questioning, daring. The silence between us stretched thin. I leaned forward without meaning to, my chest tightening, lips parting with words I couldn't form. Then, the sharp buzz of her phone split the air. She startled, stepping back just enough for the spell to break. Her phone lit up on the table by the window. A name flashed across the screen, one I didn't recognize. She hesitated before silencing it, her hand trembling just slightly. The pause was enough to bring me back to myself. Enough to remind me of the weight pressing over both of us, what it would mean if anyone saw, if anyone even suspected. "You should probably check that," I said, my voice rougher than I meant. Her lips pressed together. "It's nothing." But the way she turned away, shoulders stiff, told me it wasn't nothing. The space between us felt dangerous now. A boundary invisible but alive, pulling me toward her and daring me to cross. I stepped forward anyway. She turned back, eyes widening just slightly at how close I was. The air tightened again, charged. I could smell her perfume, faint and sweet, tangled with the earthy scent of the garden. Her hand lifted, hesitant, trembling, and brushed a stray leaf from my shirt. The touch was feather-light, lingering longer than it needed to. My breath caught, every nerve straining toward her. "People wouldn't understand," she whispered, almost too softly to hear. "I know." But neither of us moved. Her hand slid lower, resting briefly against my chest before she pulled it back like she'd burned herself. My own hand rose instinctively, stopping her retreat, fingers brushing over hers, catching her for just a second. The garden seemed to hold its breath. Her lips parted, her gaze dropping to my mouth. My heart thundered, pounding so hard I thought she could hear it. I leaned closer, barely an inch between us now, close enough to feel the warmth of her breath against my skin. "Don't," she whispered, but it wasn't firm. It wasn't final. It was fragile, breaking under the weight of what we both wanted. I froze, torn between fear and need, between everything that could shatter and everything that already had. And then, the sound of footsteps crunched against the gravel path behind the fence. A neighbor's voice called out, casual, friendly, too close. We broke apart instantly, breathing hard, guilt slamming into the space that had been full of nothing but want. But even as we stepped back, even as the world reminded us we shouldn't, her hand lingered against mine one last time. And somehow, that touch was stronger than all the distance we tried to put between us. The evening slipped in quietly, the garden sinking into shadows. She had lit a lantern on the patio, its glow soft and golden, catching in her hair and outlining the curve of her face. We hadn't spoken much since the neighbor's voice had passed through the fence. But silence didn't make the tension fade, it made it sharper, louder. She poured 2 glasses of water, sliding one toward me with fingers that trembled slightly. "You should head inside soon," she said, though her tone betrayed her. It wasn't a dismissal, it was a plea she couldn't finish. I shook my head slowly. "Not yet." Her eyes lifted, catching mine. For a moment, she looked younger, unguarded, almost uncertain. And then she looked away, brushing her hair back, though strands fell right back across her cheek. Before I could stop myself, I reached out. My hand found her face gently, brushing those strands aside. My thumb lingered against her temple, the warmth of her skin pulling me closer without words. She froze, not pulling away, not moving closer, just suspended. Her breath caught. "You shouldn't," she whispered, though the words cracked as if she didn't believe them. "I can't keep pretending," I said, my voice low, shaking. "Not with you standing this close." The confession hung in the air, dangerous and irreversible. Her lips parted, but no words came. Instead, she leaned ever so slightly into my hand, her cheek pressing into my palm like she'd been waiting for it. Desire warred with fear between us. I could see it in the way her eyes darted to the door, then back to me. The way her fingers twisted the edge of her dress, holding on to something she was afraid to let go of. "I'm not what you think," she breathed. "I've made mistakes. I'm older. People will talk. They'll say, I don't care what they say." The words were too fast, too raw. But I meant them. Her hand lifted then, slowly, hesitantly, until her fingertips rested against my chest. I felt her touch through fabric as though nothing separated us. Her eyes met mine again, searching, trembling, daring me to break first. The world had narrowed to this, the warmth of her hand, the glow of the lantern, the sharp rhythm of my pulse echoing in my ears. I leaned closer. Her breath brushed against my lips, hot, unsteady. My hand slid from her cheek to the back of her neck, pulling her just a fraction nearer. She didn't resist. Her voice broke the silence, soft and devastating. "If we do this, nothing will be the same." I whispered back, so close my words almost touched her mouth, "Then maybe it's time." The space between us vanished until only a breath remained. I could feel the tremor in her body, the surrender in the way her eyes fluttered shut, the tilt of her chin that begged for what we both wanted. And just as my lips brushed the corner of hers, the back door creaked again. We froze, hearts pounding, caught between retreat and the point of no return. The door slammed shut again, but no one came out. Just the echo, as if the house itself was warning us. She pulled back quickly, one hand pressed against her lips, the other clutching the table's edge for balance. Her chest rose and fell, uneven. "I shouldn't have let that happen," she whispered. "It didn't happen," I said, though the words tasted like a lie. My lips still burned from being so close to hers, my hand still ached from the memory of her skin. Her eyes narrowed, pained. "Don't say that." I wanted to close the distance again, to prove that it had happened, even if it was just a near kiss, even if it lived only in the space between us. But then her phone buzzed again on the table. This time, the name flashing across the screen froze me where I stood. It wasn't just anyone. It was my father. Her breath hitched when she saw it too. She didn't pick it up. Didn't silence it. Just stared, her fingers trembling, her body suddenly rigid. The buzzing stopped, leaving an even heavier silence behind. I told him you were helping me in the garden, she said finally, her voice low, strained. That's all. That's all he needs to know. But her hands betrayed her, twisting together, restless, guilty. The ground tilted beneath me. It wasn't just the age gap anymore. It wasn't just the risk of being seen. It was him. My father. I stepped back, though every nerve in me screamed to step forward. So he knows I'm here. She nodded. He knows. And if she stopped, biting her lip hard, as if the words themselves might break us apart. I moved closer again, instinct overruling thought. Does he know about this? My voice faltered, but my eyes stayed locked on hers. Her silence was an answer. Not yes, not no. Just the unbearable weight of what we'd almost done. She brushed past me suddenly, her shoulder grazing mine, her warmth flooding me even as she tried to escape it. We can't keep doing this, she whispered, but her voice cracked on the last word. I caught her wrist before she could step away. Not tight, just enough to hold her there. Her pulse beat wild beneath my fingers. Then why don't you pull away? I asked. Her body stilled. For a moment, she didn't breathe. Her eyes glistened in the lantern light, raw and unguarded, and I knew she wanted this as much as I did, no matter what it cost. Her hand trembled in mine, caught between resistance and surrender. And then she whispered the truth that changed everything, because I stopped trying a long time ago. The words shattered the last of the distance between us. I pulled her closer. She didn't resist. The garden, the house, the world itself seemed to vanish as she leaned into me, our bodies pressed too close, too certain now to deny. And in that moment, I knew there was no turning back. The garden was swallowed by night now, the lantern throwing long shadows that swayed across the grass. Her wrist was still in my hand, her pulse wild beneath my touch. Neither of us spoke for what felt like forever. The silence was thick, unyielding, carrying all the weight of the decision we hadn't yet made. Finally, she broke it. Her voice was low, shaky, but deliberate. If we cross this line, there's no undoing it. I stepped closer, close enough that her breath brushed against my jaw. We already crossed it the moment you stopped pulling away. Her lips parted, trembling, her body rigid with fear and want. I could feel the tension in her, the way her shoulders pressed back as if bracing for impact, even as her chest leaned subtly forward, toward me. You don't understand, she whispered. People will talk. He will, I don't care about him, I cut in, sharper than I meant to. I care about you. Her eyes glistened, the fight in her wavering. My hand slid from her wrist up to her arm, then her shoulder, until my palm rested against the side of her neck. Her skin was warm, her pulse frantic under my thumb. She didn't move away. Instead, she whispered, "You're too young for this." I leaned closer, so close the tip of my nose brushed hers. Then why does it feel like I've been waiting for you all my life? Her breath caught, her eyes fluttering shut. For one suspended second, the world disappeared, the house, the risks, the rules, and it was only her and me, the heat between us undeniable, the choice hanging in the air like a final, fragile thread. Her hands lifted slowly, hesitantly, until they pressed against my chest. For a heartbeat, I thought she would push me away. But instead, her fingers curled into my shirt, pulling me closer, pulling me into her. The air snapped. Her forehead leaned against mine, her lips just inches from mine, her voice breaking as she finally confessed, "I can't fight it anymore." Neither could I. Our mouths nearly met, a breath apart, every part of me aching to close the gap. But I paused, just for a second, to let her choose. To give her one last chance to step back. She didn't. Her grip on my shirt tightened, her body pressed into mine, her trembling no longer from hesitation but from surrender. And then it happened, not loud, not dramatic, but quiet, inevitable. The kind of closeness that left no room for doubt, no space for retreat. Messy. Raw. Human. When we finally broke apart, her eyes searched mine with something new, not fear, not guilt, but clarity. "This changes everything," she whispered. I nodded, my voice steady this time. "Good. Because I don't want anything to be the same." The night closed around us, but it didn't matter. For the first time, we weren't hiding anymore. We understood each other fully. The night had grown still, the garden wrapped in silence except for the faint hum of crickets. We stood there, breathless, hearts still racing from everything that had just unfolded. For a moment, neither of us knew what to say. But somehow, words weren't necessary. The look in her eyes told me more than 100 conversations ever could. Her fingers were still gripping the fabric of my shirt, though softer now, as if she were afraid that letting go might undo what had just been admitted between us. I covered her hand with mine, steady, reassuring, silently promising that she didn't need to be afraid. "I've been so careful for so long," she said finally, her voice hushed and raw. "Careful not to feel too much. Not to need anyone. But then you," she trailed off, her throat tightening. I lifted my hand to her cheek, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Then me," I whispered back. Her lips curved into the faintest smile, one touched by relief and disbelief all at once. The fear that had shadowed her expression earlier seemed to ease, slowly replaced by something softer. Vulnerability. Hope. I pulled her closer, not with urgency this time, but with a kind of quiet certainty. Her body fit easily against mine, her head resting beneath my chin, her arms wrapping around my waist as if they had always belonged there. I breathed her in, the faint scent of earth from the garden still clinging to her, mingled with the warmth of her skin. For the first time, the silence wasn't heavy. It was comforting. "You know this won't be simple," she murmured into my chest. I kissed the top of her head, lingering there, my lips pressed gently against her hair. "Nothing worth it ever is." She tilted her face up then, her eyes searching mine for any hint of hesitation. But there was none. I wasn't uncertain anymore. I wanted her, all of her, the guarded parts, the brave parts, the parts that feared being seen. My hand found hers, our fingers intertwining naturally, perfectly. She squeezed lightly, and I felt her exhale as though she had finally let go of a weight she'd been carrying for years. We sat together on the old wooden bench beneath the lantern's glow. She leaned into me, her hand still in mine, her head resting against my shoulder. The world outside the garden might still judge, question, or complicate things. But here, in this quiet space we had created, none of it mattered. What mattered was the warmth of her touch. The steady rhythm of her breathing. The knowledge that for the first time, we weren't resisting, we were choosing. And in that choice, we found peace,